So we are short panel today, and
I beg your pardon.
Well, I know it doesn't apply.
Saying that I'm short.
Well, I know he's just
I'm
making all
saying that
kinds of
you have
mistakes.
fewer people co-hosting. I usually have
Fewer
nice-
people.
nice group of people here to contribute, and it is less than typical. And we did talk a lot about last week, and we talked a lot about the current status of the different ways that caregivers are being attacked. And we have a great guest lined up, and he happens to be here already. And so I thought maybe we could get the show on the road as long as Mr. Bonsett is ready to join us.
How's it
Hello,
going,
sir. How
guys?
are you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
All right. Well, thanks a lot for joining us, and we'll just get started if that's cool with you.
Let's get into it. Nice to meet you guys.
All right. I'm Jamie Lowell. We've got Colin McDougall and Rick Thompson here with us, and I know a little bit about you, but we'll give you an opportunity to kind of give us the background of how you end up in this space. You got a few years in on the industry, have experience in businesses in Colorado, had some time in Oregon. I'm not sure if there's still any activity there right now, but I know that there was some time spent in Oregon. And you have a lot of stuff going on in Michigan. You have a couple stores open right now, but there are plans for big cultivation, a couple more stores, and just to have a big presence here at large. Is that close?
That is really close, Jamie. Thank you. It was,
all right.
I'll give you my elevator speech on where I came from. I happen to be in the real estate market as a real estate professional here in Colorado when cannabis started to kind of sort of move towards recreational, and so I got in early. Dipped my toe early and didn't really get serious until about 2012, 2013, once recreational cannabis passed here in Colorado, and owned my first dispensary in a town called Carbondale, Colorado. Quickly learned how to work with the municipalities to sort of issue the licenses and develop a good relationship with those municipalities from the sense of trying to make sure that we could work with them, and they were places that made sense and was cannabis friendly. So that's kind of my first start here in Colorado, and then quickly kind of figured out that cultivating large cannabis was really where my heart lied. I always loved to grow weed, and so I opened a large. We developed a large scale facility in Colorado. In Denver, and it was a 45,000 square facility that we built out in like 2013, and that was really my liaison into larger scale cannabis business, and really kind of led me to NoBo. And really for us, it's all about cultivating the best weed we can at the lowest cost of goods sold. That's really kind of what our model is. And no, we are not in Oregon anymore. Oregon was a place where I definitely had to cut my teeth and learned a lot of lessons. Learned that you couldn't just put up cannabis facilities and think you're going to make money. That you need to have a longer strategy, and as far as being vertically integrated and things like that. So Michigan was coming online, and I had the ability to kind of start fresh in Michigan. I'm from Indiana originally, and so it was great to be able to come to Michigan and be an early person here into the space. And right now we've got retail locations in Eversburg and Muskegon. We've got one in Benton Harbor opening, as well as one in Battle Creek over the next 60 days. And we've got a couple others lined up that are in development. And we've got a 33,000 square foot cultivation site in Benton Harbor, and that's been an awesome project. We brought in our patented LED technology, and we also have an extraction lab there. So we literally just got adult use last week. So we've primarily been working in the medical market over the last 9 months. And that's, I have to clarify this. We're really mainly Michigan-based employees. So our company is really entrenched in Michigan, and we love it there. That's a little bit about me.
Right on. So I heard in there your patented lights.
Yes.
And, does that mean that you have a light company with patented lights?
We do. We have a company called Grow Ray Technologies, and NoBo's one of the largest owners of that particular business. And we got involved in that here in Boulder, Colorado, where I live, and where I'm from at this point, where our home is. From the NoBo perspective, as far as where we started, again, most of our employees are in Michigan because we do have operations here, but they're not as large as they are in Michigan. But our Grow Ray Technologies here, and it came from a patent from the University of Georgia years ago that some scientists developed here in Boulder, and they gave it to me. And at that point, I was using HPS and gave it to my growers, and they were like, "Well, this light actually works." And then the rest was history. And now our facilities are all built with this light. And we've got several other large scale facilities in Michigan with the Grow Ray light as well. And we really just feel like we know that it outperforms HPS, but it also provides a much better product.
Wow. That's very cool. And saves a lot of energy costs, I assume. And
it does. You look at it like one of the things we learned early on in Colorado when we built our facility, we thought it was all about, okay, we just need as many plants under canopy as we can. We didn't really worry about, we didn't think about thermal management and pest mitigation and all these things that we have to deal with now from a testing perspective. And so we quickly learned that the HPS was really an environmental terrorist, I like to call it, right? I mean, it just, you're burning this very hot lamp, and now you got to bring in all this HVAC to cool it, and it's a difficult process. You're always fighting the HVAC. There's never a good, really good options for HVAC, and just typically our light and a lot of lights that have kind of knocked ours off, as well as some of our competitors are really say 700 amps coming out of the wall versus 1180 with a 1,000 watt HPS. And so we feel like states like Massachusetts, California are already starting to mandate it, and we just decided to be early adopters of the technology, and it's working out.
Alan, one of the things we're seeing in California is that there are very strict energy restrictions, and environmental impact statements are required for all cultivation situations, whether indoor or outdoor. Now, I know that standard is very difficult to meet, but is that something that you'd like to see implemented in other states? I know you have a multi-state perspective.
Absolutely. That's a great question, Rick. We are implementing it here in Colorado. Our large-scale project that we're working on here in Colorado with our partners at Ceres, they're a greenhouse manufacturer here in Boulder, Colorado, where, without going too much detail, Rick, it's a sun chamber system that uses the sun and reclaims water and only uses our light as needed. And it's a sealed environment that is GMP, which if you're familiar with GMP, that's really the standards that we feel like will take hold once federal legalization happens. And that's what we're looking at right now. In Europe. So Europe already mandates GMP rated facilities for cultivation. So what we have what we're building is a project that's going to have less of a carbon footprint than any other project we know, and that's one of our missions here in the cannabis business from the NoBo perspective.
We talk about. I'm sorry, Jamie.
No.
Go ahead.
No, I was just agreeing with his approach to want to be environmentally conscious. So I was just supporting that.
But the concept of making sure that there's, for example, a certain number of lumens always available for your plants to consume inside the greenhouse, and that there would be a detector that would only activate your lights if the natural ambient sunlight were deficient to produce that. That's pretty intense. That's what we're talking about, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We have a adaptive light sensor that is analog, and the analog is fixture to fixture. So I can remember, being out in Carpentria, California, and I guess Rick, if that's where you're from, area in California, we noticed that there was parts of these greenhouses that were shaded in aspects in certain parts of the day and needed light, and the other parts of the greenhouse didn't. And so our next version is more of a digital fixture to control it from a central control system. But the analog system works really well. And what people don't know is when you keep the proper PPFD on the plant, it grows a more consistent product. So, and in Europe and places where testing is even stricter from the cannabinoid profile than it is here in the States, and at least in most states, that's critical.
Let's catch our audience up a little bit. You mentioned the term GMP a couple of times. GMP stands for Good Manufacturing Processes, and that's really a standard of procedures that's adopted by industry or by government and then imposed upon industry to make sure that everybody's doing things to a minimum standard. Isn't that correct?
That's absolutely correct. And a lot of it has to do with cross-contamination, right? We've seen so many companies buy cure boxes to cure their deficiencies in their cultivation site, for example. And what we look at it is like clean space, has to occur. Clean room space has to occur. Keep the pest out, like the art of war, right? Fortify your fort, right? Don't let the enemy inside. So that's really what GMP is all about, is making sure that pathogens and mites can't come in the facility and you're growing a cleaner product. And that's the way we see the future going. And we feel like when you go in our stores, you'll see the difference in our product.
Right on. What does NoBo stand for?
NoBo. What does NoBo stand for? It stands for. We have a bunch of things. Those who are in the know NoBo. No, I'm just teasing. That's one of our little cheesy taglines. NoBo actually stands for North Boulder County. That's where we started growing weed years ago, and there's a huge culture in North Boulder County up in the mountains here, where there were a lot of people actually from Michigan, for example, who moved up here like in the 60s and started growing cannabis at a high level. And that was my introduction to cannabis, and that's kind of where it came from.
That's cool. Very nice. So how does the laws in Michigan stack up to the other places that you do business in or have done business in?
I like Michigan. Like in Colorado, the early on days, we had the enforcement division, and the biggest difference is that there were people who were growing cannabis illegally here in Colorado, and they were allowed to basically get licenses. And the regulatory board here kind of had to deal with a lot of that riffraff. So you're taking something that was illegal and you're turning it into a legal business, and you've got people who were breaking the law that you had to deal with on that. So it was set up more like policing, if you will, the industry. And it's changed here in Colorado since then. And I think as far as the enforcement division, Michigan really started out in that, as you guys know, basically saying, look, we're not going to allow black market growers to get in. If you have $1,000, you have a cash going in your account of $1,000, you got to explain that, where it come from, right? And you also had to put a lot of money up to get that license. And so I like that because we're trying to make this space, not to weed out people that, no pun intended, that can't afford it, but like growing cannabis is a really difficult thing. And running a dispensary with 280E, with the 280E laws, make it tough to be profitable. And in this space, you really need to know what you're doing. And so Michigan, the state has been awesome to work with us. The MRA has been great. They're getting it right there, in my perspective, especially considering looking at California and Oregon and even Washington for that amount. But I really think Michigan's doing a good job, is my opinion. It's
Ellen,
not easy. What's that?
Kind of contradictory to the way that most of us believe, because we believe that those high entry fees that you just described as a positive for the industry are really a negative, and they keep people out of the industry that actually belong in here, people that actually help to build the industry, upon whose shoulders we all stand at this time. And you should probably know that Jamie and I both had different ones, but both had illegal dispensaries here in the state of Michigan before the medical program were kind of the riffraff you just mentioned.
Isn't it that gone though, Rick? I mean, isn't the amount of money that you're putting in there, it's gone. I mean, they're not looking. They've opened Michigan up further than they did before. And so when I say riffraff, I mean we're paying $60,000 for a license, right? And so if the state's going to protect, if the state's going to issue those licenses, they have to protect, the cultivator. And so, I too came as a caregiver and a lot of other people, but the point is that we're making this a legal business. And I don't know. I mean, didn't mean to offend you there, Rick.
Well,
Alan, go ahead, Rick.
Well, I mean, when we talk about making low barriers to entry, that's reducing some of the extreme costs that come in there. When we say having an inclusive industry, that means the people who were doing it for 10 years before we got the legalization laws. At one point, I know you're not from Michigan, but at one point we had 500 dispensaries in the state, all of them running in the gray market. 500. So it's quite an industry that existed prior to licensing. And
Sure.
People are really excluded by a couple of the things that made the industry strong.
Yeah, I think your point's taken, Alan. But as Rick points out, that this is kind of a sensitive issue for us here, particularly many of those who work very hard on achieving a lot of the things for individual rights and small businesses. And you may or may not be aware of this group called the Michigan Cannabis Manufacturers Association, and they, along with other large investors, have been working to peel back individual rights and to make it more difficult for smaller businesses to operate. And in this climate right now, to be talking about the need for extra restrictions and to keep riffraff out is just a little sensitive, even though you probably don't intend to be, so inflammatory.
Yeah, I definitely didn't mean that inflammatory. Well, let's look at Illinois. Let's look at what happens when the government tries to step in and allow social equity applicants to be a part of a government mandated, regulated cannabis industry, and look what happened there. So it's always a double-edged sword. In Illinois, the people that deserve the license didn't really get them. You know what I mean? So it's a difficult, sensitive process. When by no means do I call you guys riffraff. We're all riffraff, right? I mean, come on, we're on a podcast, smoking weed, hanging out, talking about cannabis, but it is a hot subject by now, by far, and with everybody, it's everybody's right to be able to grow cannabis, right? And I think that's the most awesome aspect of it. But you also have to think about what it takes to actually, get through testing and what the requirements are. And those requirements are very, very strict. And unless you've got the ability to get through, to be able to have the hardware to get through that, it could be a very difficult business.
Yeah, but who is the state to decide who gets a chance and who doesn't get a chance? Everybody should have an opportunity to. By saying that it's difficult to survive in that industry, so we need to limit the number of people in it. That's protectionist. That's not opening the door and involving a lot the people.
Do you feel like that's happening though, Rick? And do you feel like that's happening in Michigan right now after the laws have changed? I mean, in the sense of you still feel like it's very closed off? Because it feels to me like it's becoming more open, and from my perspective, and maybe I'm missing something.
It really isn't, though, when you talk about social equity applicants or people that have caregiver licenses. Social equity applicants, the number one barrier to them becoming successful is access to capital. It's not an inability to be able to competently run a business. It's not an inability to know how to properly cultivate cannabis. It's all about achieving Benjamins. So by keeping that barrier to entry high, we're preventing people who really deserve an opportunity to get into this industry from getting into this industry. And it's also the number one reason why social equity isn't more successful here in Michigan and why it's not more successful in Illinois. And oftentimes the people that are lobbying in order to keep those barriers to entry high are people like yourself, Alan, who actually say things like you just said earlier. I'm not trying to be offensive, but when you say things like it's good that we don't let everybody into the industry, that's That's kind of backwards. So
Well, I think it's wrong, Rick, and I think maybe because you're kind of talking to the wrong person about that. I mean, if you're looking at NoBo and who we are, I get you. I understand you got somebody you got a beef out there with, but you're taking it up with the wrong person here. We are in Benton Harbor, knee deep in social equity. We are in an opportunity zone, one of the few cannabis providers that I know in an opportunity zone. So what I would say is, NoBo does a lot to give back to the community. We're very well known for doing that in the communities that we're in. So I would I would stand corrected on putting me in the category of the man. I'm not we're not a publicly traded company, and we're not that big. We worked really hard to get in the position that we're in through hard work and doing right by the community, and that's what we'll keep doing.
Right.
I can't solve the problems of all the incarcerations and everything that's occurred in cannabis over the years. It's what I'm trying to do is just make a better product at a lower price, and we're we offer ISOs in our company, so we really do our own thing here, and so I feel like you might be biting the messenger here.
Yeah. So, Alan, let's ask you directly. Do you support, oppose, or neutral on opening up the law and peeling back existing rights for caregivers, or making more obstructions or burdens on their activities, and making it more difficult for smaller businesses to flourish?
So I am definitely I'm all about ownership and love the country we live in, because you can go and open an LLC for $70. So I'm always all about small business and allowing that small business to prosper, and everybody gets a shot. So there's no question on that. We look at it as we're going to compete with anyone, and that's what we have to do in this space is compete. And unfortunately, that's just the nature of a capitalistic society. But no, I think that everybody deserves an opportunity, and that's part of why we build our company the way it is. That's why we offer employee stock options. Employees who do not have the ability to go and start a large cultivation site can come to NoBo and be a part of our team and be compensated when the overall company, if we succeed. There's no, just because we have a couple dispensaries and a large grow, that doesn't mean that we won. You know what I mean? We've got a lot of work to do every day to establish our brand and to try to keep the bills paid. And I'll tell you what I don't like is the weed tax that we get everywhere we go. And that's not going to change whether or not it's a little guy or a big guy. And so I think that, that's an issue that our industry needs to address. Just the cost of capital for everybody, the cost of services that have gone up, the cost of goods that are higher for cannabis people. Those are, there's a lot of, the amount of taxes we pay. These are all things that make our lives much harder in the cannabis industry.
So that's cool. And I hear the effort on social equity, the effort on making a great place to work, to support your people, to be a good competitive company, to look for things within the system that could make for better efficiency and less costs and that type of thing. But the reason that the MCMA wants to peel back on rights of caregivers and create more burdens and make it more difficult for small businesses to flourish is because they believe that by doing that, it'll help out their own businesses.
Sure.
So, I mean, when it comes down to that, when and if, and we expect some action on this in the fall, we might be able to defeat it, and we're going to try to. Are you in support of that? Are you against that? Or do you think you're going to stand aside?
I mean, I'm in support of it. And why not? Right. I think the issue that you're going to come to is, caregiver product was able to be sold inside the market, and you're going to come into a question of testing and facilities. So there's two parts of it. Is the facilities that are built from a caregiver's perspective are they safe? And if you're building a safe facility, then I'm all about it. But it's safety first. The product has to have, it has to be clean product.
So you're talking about if the caregivers were able to bring product into the commercial market? That's not on the table. Yes, I agree that if caregivers, and I agree that they should, were able to resume bringing product to market, they'd have to meet the standards that are in place, and that kind of stuff. But what the MCMA wants to do is simply make it more difficult for caregivers to operate at all, period, out of fear that their activity cuts into their bottom line. And I don't know if you can still hear me or not, but
I can't. Sorry about that.
We're all doing that. We're all doing it, Alan. No problem.
Right. We're working against that. We're working against any changes that create more restrictions or more burdens for anybody else. And so, that's really what we're trying to. I'm asking you, if you'll support that perspective, where we don't create more difficulties for anybody else, and worry about, as you described earlier, creating a great product, offering it at a fair price with really good service, and having that be your focus.
Yeah, it's so tough, because it's like you go to, or you guys asked me about Oregon, right? Because I think the reason I'm bringing up Oregon is that, Oregon was the exact opposite in kind of what you guys were talking about. And so I don't know the answer, guys. This is just a conversation. So but I'm just trying to go down this road with you guys. But in Oregon, they gave licenses to everyone that they possibly could, and everybody wanted to be a grower there. And what I saw there was a lot of really sad people. Well, honestly, broken people that had their dreams taken away because they got their license and they thought they were just going to grow cannabis and make a bunch of money, and they didn't. And so that was a real issue. So it's just it's a difficult process. But in the end, what I would say with NoBo is we always believed years ago when we got in this space, we realized here in Colorado that it was going to be competitive, and that if we wanted to be in this space, we had to compete. And so, but yes, I will support it, Rick.
I beg your pardon?
I mean, yes, I will absolutely support what you're talking about. I mean, I think people, we don't want this more regulated than it already is. It's very, very regulated right now.
The two proposals that give us most pause that are on the table would be, one, to reduce the number of plants allowed per caregiver and reduce the number of plants allowed per patient, which that's significantly a problem for us, since at that point patients would have fewer plants than non-patients, and that doesn't make any sense. You get where I'm saying, right, Alan?
Sure. Yep.
Yep. So that's
and there's no reason.
And the other thing is to require testing of caregiver cannabis before it's distributed to their patient. Now, there's never been an issue with caregiver cannabis in Michigan. There's no history of illnesses. We have thousands and thousands of transactions happening every day, every week, and there are no illnesses. Nobody's getting hurt. There's no demonstrable need for there to be testing. But it's viewed that requiring testing between the patient and caregiver would then stifle the caregiver market, and in effect, perhaps drive patients into regular retail markets in order to purchase their cannabis. But there's really no reason for that. So I guess what we're looking for is your opinion about forcing caregivers to test cannabis before they deliver it to their patient.
I'm sorry, Rick, I missed your last question there.
Well, forcing caregivers to test cannabis before it's delivered to a patient. Certainly there's a need to test cannabis in the commercial market, but small batch homegrown cannabis being delivered from caregiver directly to patient with no intermediary, you think we should be testing that?
I don't think so. I mean, I think if the patient is comfortable with where they're getting their product from, and each individual has the right to grow so many plants, I would say no. Right. But I would say that also a consumer has the right to know that if they're going into a legal provisional, that they're buying cannabis that is tested, that they feel comfortable about.
Right, and they can't speak to everybody who produced that medicine and look at the process and
right.
So they need that kind of standard in place for that type of a purchase.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's no fun, guys. Testing is you want to talk about things that aren't fair. We could talk about testing for a while. Testing isn't really a perfect science either, but it's difficult. Just this space. Guys, I've been in this a decade, and I've had I don't know. I think I'm on my 11th to 13th cannabis business, basically. Anywhere from extraction to large cultivation sites to you name it, I've done it, and very difficult. And like I said, you brought up Oregon. Man, there were a lot of broken dreams in Oregon, and so, but everybody deserves to chase their dream. And if their dream is to grow cannabis, they should be able to do so. I love it because I have people coming to me that are friends of mine, and they have children that are no longer children that are in college that want to get into the cannabis industry, and they're thinking about that as a career, and so I like that aspect of cannabis, that it's becoming more mainstream. I know that there's negatives on that, but for a kid to be able to pursue his dream in the cannabis industry like I was able to pursue mine, I think is critical. And I think through education and testing and they're unfortunately regulating the market allows some of those things to happen, and there is good and there is bad.
Well, it's tough because when you talk about licensing, you want to make it fair for everybody, but there is no fair standard. Some people have easy access to capital. Some people have impossible to correct histories that would disallow them. Some people don't have connections to business, which would allow them to be able to do some of these things. So having a system that's open to all is a great concept, but creating even openness, that's a challenge. And I think that's what social equity is all about, trying to make sure that people that don't have the same abilities to access the industry as others are given a leg up in order to accomplish that. It's important for us to encourage social equity throughout the entire United States to make sure people that would otherwise be left out of this industry don't have to be.
Help me. You guys are so passionate about this, and obviously I'm passionate about cannabis, or I wouldn't be here. How do you, from the social equity aspect, how does that play out? I'm truly asking a question I don't understand. Like,
sure.
How are you expecting, like we had, I don't want to mention companies on here, but we had companies in Illinois that tried to help social equity applicants, go for an application. Is that what you mean? Like having a fund to fund social equity clients? I'm just trying to understand what's
social equity incorporates so many different things. There are state level social equity programs. There are local social equity programs. In Michigan, the primary method of social equity assistance has been through the waiving of fees or the reduction of fees, which really isn't a significant amount when you're talking about the total amount of cash that's necessary in order to start a business in this category. So when we talk about adequate social equity, that has to be funding for small businesses, incubators, low to no cost loans. We've got to get the Michigan Land Bank involved in order to free up properties. We've got to get Michigan financial institutions to make the kind of commitments that they make in other disadvantaged situations. So when we talk about social equity, it's a single term that incorporates many different aspects of benefit. So it's really difficult to decide. And in some areas of the state, for example, up north, they have a completely different social equity viewpoint than they do down in southeastern lower Michigan. So
right.
When it comes down to it, you really have to be adaptable. And there is no really one-size-fits-all social equity program.
Don't you think that it makes it kind of difficult, the federal legalization piece? And thinking through, like, when I just heard you say what you said, I think, like, okay, now you're asking for federal funding is what you're asking for, basically.
Nope.
Because, where else is it going to come from?
We've been doing social equity for 30 different states already, and it's always been funded in state. We don't need to have federal overlords giving us money. We're doing just fine in states. We just need to spend it smarter.
So you're telling me that, okay, again, I'm just trying to understand this. So the state should fund a social equity program that allows, license fees to be waived. And then beyond that, a further fund to be able to finance social equity clients. So that's what you're saying.
Yeah, I'm sure that's what's already been happening in states across the USA. Right.
Right.
Yep. Because that's, when you talk about a state program, you can't expect the federal government to fund a state program. Federal governments typically fund state programs. And we don't really want federal oversight to begin with, not immediately. What we see is there are large cultivators on the West Coast that have a plethora of cannabis. They say Oregon has a 3-year market supply stacked up in their warehouses. So what we don't want is for federal legalization to allow Oregon to dump all of that cannabis on Michigan or Illinois or Ohio or the East Coast, dumping it at less than cost, that may be less quality than what we're seeing right here, and then completely disrupt the markets. I can't imagine what it would be like for a guy like yourself. You have multiple retail outlets plus cultivation. If that were to flood the market, that might be devastating for a guy like you.
Well, it's part of the business. It's product prices are going up and down all over the place as we know. And yeah, I mean, I think, if you did that, it would be good for social equity because, the cost of capital for everyone is so expensive, and so if you had a fund that the state had that could provide capital even at a much lower rate, that might even the playing field.
That's really the goal, right? Yeah.
New York added into the language 40% of the revenue to go towards social equity funding, and that's going to be a lot of money and give it teeth. It took this many states in maybe to figure out that that's a good way of making sure that it can be facilitated and something can actually happen sooner than later. But a lot of companies in Michigan, including NoBo, do a good job of having social equity programs in place and really helping out a lot. We need more. We need, that kind of stuff. But it's not like it doesn't happen because of that.
Right. No, again, Illinois was so disappointing. It was such a great opportunity to do right there from the social equity aspect, and we'll see. Hopefully maybe they can pull a rabbit out of a hat, basically.
We were all really hoping, Alan, that Illinois would be that shining example that we could use to help to craft new state laws after that. But sometimes, wishing it to be just isn't good enough. Well,
it was right before the pandemic, and I was doing we put 17 or 20 licenses in there ourselves, and went pretty heavy and deep, and went and partnered up with everybody we could, that we thought gave us the best opportunity. And these weren't like superficial relationships. These were like, we're in bed with these people full on, and they were great people. And we brought the whole group together. Right. But at the end of the day, it was really about the veteran. It wasn't about the social equity applicant. It was about the veteran and then also big money. So, you can never trust those guys, basically, is the bottom line. But I'm at this show. I'm on a panel, and after the panel, there was a group of people there to speak with me, and they all, had put applications in and were trying to finalize them and needed information from us, like lighting plans and things like that. And so I couldn't help everybody, but I helped a few different groups with lighting plans and whatnot. And I feel for those people because I know for a fact that some of them had, some of their last savings in this, in trying to get a social equity license. And here it is, how many months later. And it's kind of sad.
We are willing to spend our last dollar to try and achieve our dreams. Isn't that true? I don't think that's uniquely American. I think that's just a human thing, no matter what culture you go to. In order to achieve something that we've really wanted that badly, we'll do almost anything. And that's why we need to really construct state laws so that they're advantageous for the people that they intend to help, which are the average Joes, not the guys who are already rich and then kind of filtering their way into the industry as just one of many businesses that they have that's contributing to their yacht fund. So,
I don't know a lot of people in cannabis like that, Rick. I'll be honest with you. So
I can introduce you to some here in Michigan.
Yeah, if you know them, I don't necessarily want to know them because that's not me. But I'm just telling you, I don't really know them. You know, that's not what I see. But that's just my perspective.
Yeah. Well, the fact is, we have a lot of partners and a lot of trade associations here in the state that are doing wonderful work. Social equity is very loosely defined in Michigan. So when you see people going out of their way to do a good job at it, you know it's because it's really within their heart, because they're not required to. They're just choosing to. That makes a big difference. Tell us a little bit about your social equity programs here in the state. What have you been doing?
Well, we have a couple different things that we're doing. We have a partnership with Ryan Bazar at Redemption. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you're familiar with him.
Never heard of him.
And then we're really doing just a lot of work in Benton Harbor. And that's really the core of where we're doing our social equity work is in Benton Harbor. We're starting our own nonprofit, really working on the community there, things that are in the future that we're really excited about. You know, obviously we're, you know, we came into that community. It's been a crazy experience for me, just in the sense that, you know, sometimes when we would be at town hall meetings, there would be a line of people out the door again to meet me and to ask for jobs. And a lot of the community has come up to me on many occasions and basically feels like cannabis is the way to really propel that community forward after, you know, years of being suppressed, you know, and having, you know, residents incarcerated. All that stuff is front and center in Benton Harbor. So for me to bring cannabis to Benton Harbor, it's a whole experience. And so the bulk of the work that we're doing is within our own community, because we're, I know I've been put as a big guy on this, but we're not. We're pretty small. So with that being said, you know, we're trying to affect change in our community, because that's what we feel like is our duty is, you know, for them letting us in the community.
Alan, that sounds like you outlined an idea, but what's the real programs that you're using? What's the real things that you're doing? How can people look forward to seeing NoBo and helping in the community?
Well, there's a lot of things. We're doing fundraiser events. We're doing. We've started a nonprofit there. We work with some local athletes there who have their own nonprofits that we support their nonprofits there in the community. We're having a job fair there, because what we've learned is a lot of individuals there don't have the ability to apply online or the ability to put a resume together. So those are some things that we're working on. Really trying to work with the community itself to form partnerships within the community, because it's going to be a little crowded there after all of the retail locations are up and running. And so, you know, we work with the art district, just a lot of different items.
Cool.
Hey, just to dig in a little bit more, what's that nonprofit about that you mentioned?
Well, we're trying to refurbish an old building in town, and so we're working on refurbishing an old building in town that is really early on. So I can't tell you all the details, because it's not fully where it needs to be, but it's something we've been working on for a couple of years. But it's also important to understand, guys, like NoBo's pre-revenue. And so, you know, we've invested in the community about $12 million. So, you know, we're doing all we can, you know, moving forward again, we just got adult use last week. So, and with COVID, you know, we've got a lot of things planned, but we want to do a yearly fundraiser there. That's like a food drive where we have a kind of music and really kind of bring out the cannabis culture, basically. So that's one thing we want to do. Just, you know, those are a few things that we want to do. One of the things we're trying to do is hire more local people. It's been really difficult with the cannabis industry. You know, there's not a lot of experience in Michigan compared to how many businesses are now operational. So the point is, if you're a good cannabis professional in this space, you are very well, you're needed right now. And so training is important, right? Training people to do the work so that the business can be more efficient.
Hey, couple of questions here before we actually wrap up, and we've had like a pretty cool discussion. It's gone on for a while before you know, and I really appreciate your time. And I'm not sure if you expected to spend this much time, but really appreciate you sticking this out with us. When you're presenting cannabis, is there much? Do you hold much stock in the traditional like high THC, something that's necessarily called sativa or indicas? How do you present cannabis?
It's a good question, Jamie. We've actually, that's always the age-old thing, right? Because we have our main, some of our purchasers or buyers, I should say, in Michigan. And again, we've only been medical, so we're just getting going here. But early on, we're learning that same thing we learned in Colorado. If it's not 20%, they don't want it. It's just the way that it is. But all the growers and everybody else is like, this is BS. It's really about the cannabinoid profile, right? But how do you educate the market? And so how do you fight that fight? So one thing we've been kind of playing around with as of late is, and we haven't done this, but it's to start to test all the cannabinoid profiles. I'm saying the wrong thing. It's the terpenes. We want to test for terpenes, right? And maybe that's the way that we can try to differentiate our 16% bud or whatever it is. But to be honest with you, we've had to steer away from it and make sure that we can grow plants that grow over 20%. So I don't have that issue. And it's kind of BS. We all know it is. Doesn't make it a better high, if you will. But it's the way the market is, unfortunately. But that's what we've seen in Colorado. I can tell you years ago, it was the funniest story. One of the largest, Colorado companies, they're like, is your product 20%? Yes, it's 20%. I sell them 20 pounds. The next thing I know, it comes back because it was 19.9. And, literally, this is like 4 or 5 years ago, guys. So
you can't ever be that back anyway, right? It might have been 23.
I mean,
with the margin of error, right? Yeah.
A lot of times you get the numbers back, and you're like, "Hey, can you retest this?" And all of a sudden, it's a completely different number. So it's a difficult stuff. There's a lot of we've all been pioneers in this space, and it's not there's a lot of bumpy roads, and testing is one of them, as well as the social equity conversation that we got into. It's a loaded thing, but I think we can all rejoice in the fact that we're moving cannabis forward. And if you look at how short of a time in the grand scheme of things, we've taken it from where it was to where we are. I think I'm proud of that as a entrepreneur in this space.
Right on. Hey, is there anything else you want to leave us with before we close up the segment?
Well, if any of the viewers are in Muskegon, and you mentioned that you saw me on this on your show here,
Cabbage Cafe,
you get a special discount.
That's awesome.
Hey.
And I love being on the show, guys. I love being pressed. It's so much fun. So as you can tell, I will sit here and talk forever about cannabis. And so anytime you guys want to have another conversation, I think we could. There's a lot of stuff we could talk about.
We'll do it again for sure, man. I appreciate it. Appreciate your time. And
thank you so much.
Good luck with the opening of the new stores and the new facilities here in Michigan.
I hope to see one of you guys there soon.
Thanks a lot, man.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Appreciate it.